Hey, welcome to pretty much WTF as MMT. There's been a lot of talk about the debt ceiling, which, just so you know, it's a self-imposed BS that Barack Obama, who I continuously despise, same thing with Clinton, same thing with Jimmy Carter and other like that, because uh in Obama's case, he continued the whole thing of we're broke. He never once acknowledged the fact that the United States is a sovereign currency, but instead continued the neocon BS that Clinton started. And Clinton himself signed the termination of the ICC, which deregulated a lot of the railroads, made regulations very minimal, and is one of the reasons why a lot of the categories like what happened in Palestine, Ohio, happened because apparently, according to DeWine, the governor of Ohio, my governor, I suppose, said that there was no communication, that this was a train with the majority of it being toxic materials. Well, if the railroad industry still had the ICC on it, I think that's what it is, ICC. Don't ask what the heck it stands for because I don't know right now. I think it's intercontinental something. Anyway, then that would have been told to them so they can then maybe get people out of the town or some to that effect. Either way, they would have known. But supposedly, I don't know if he knew or he didn't know. He could be playing dumb. Who knows? But the point is, if Clinton hadn't signed into law the termination of ICC back in '96, 2 years before he did the same thing with Glass-Steagall, which helped create the whole financial crisis. Then also keeping regulations off of derivatives, which is basically just like betting on market-based securities that were sold to people who could not afford them overall, who were sold those sort of things. Anyway, if all that shit wouldn't have happened, then the possibility of this kind of crap would be less likely. Be less likely to have the boom bust of the housing market, tech, and all that other stuff. Anyway, that happened under that happened to Democrats, really, and but it was wanted by the Republicans. So there you go. Anyway, so to get the whole thing, yeah, that's why I don't like Obama. That's why I don't. The reason why I don't like Carter is because um he basically hired Paul Volcker, uh who pretty much pushed all the interest rates up, which created a whole bunch of unemployment, and cost of living went up by the way. And yeah, the one thing he did do that was positive was he did, at the time it was positive because it did bring down the price of gas and oil, was lifting the cap on natural gas. However, him showing that solar power, if this is true, was effective, then he should have been pushing for solar power back then, because apparently he has solar panels on the White House at that time. If this is true, then he really screwed the pooch on that, because he could have sat there and we could have had less energy bills for the past fucking 40 years if he would have actually made sure to put solar panels as a must for upcoming housing projects at that time. But anyway, that's neither here nor there at the moment. But that's what I wanted to kind of see on that. Anyway, so this is the list of shit that, excuse my language, I really don't give a fuck anymore. YouTube can kiss my ass overall. Uh, I'm more on TikTok, anyways. You can follow me there on at Calvin Taylor 666. Hopefully I will be bringing MMT to TikTok when they get 1,000 followers, which seems more likely now because I actually have a 804 right now. So for those who have followed me on TikTok, I appreciate you very much, and I will support your content as long as you support my content. Anyway, so the cuts that Republicans want Democrats to do: 404 billion from student loans. Now, one thing that you'll notice that they do not put up on the table the tax breaks for their donors. The tax breaks actually as a deficit because it's not being taxed out. It's still technically being spent into the economy, but it's just redistributed through tax cut. There we go. Okay, so let's see, 281 billion from improper payments made by federal agencies, which I'm not really sure what that's ambiguous on that one. The 100 billion from unspent COVID funds. I mean, that's not spending the economy. That could be that could be transferred to something else. So it doesn't have to be cut. It's just needs to be put towards something else. 87 billion from the EPA. That's the one good thing that that Nixon did. And that was under political pressure from the Democrats, I think. Was the EPA. Given the crap that just happened, that should be put off the table. 770 billion from reducing food stamps, child tax credit fraud. I have yet to see any proof that that's actually happened. But it could be the same type of fraud that's in 10% in voting fraud, or no, not 10%, sorry, 2% to voting fraud, which is like nothing. See, 65 billion from lower Obama cap, so they want to actually make things more expensive for people. 13 billion from certain green vehicles that would actually give more of a thing for their gas and oil, something matching as far as natural gas. Their donors, which actually would, if that was actually kept going, that would actually create savings for people because they will not be paying more for the gas and oil in the long term. See, that's actually a savings for their voters. 10 million from legal assistance for migrants. So they want migrants to not have any legal representation, which they barely have as it is. 6.6 million from woke projects. I'm pretty sure majority of the woke projects they're referring to actually would feed into the local economy. So they're actually trying to take more money out of the economy, creating more of a demand for the same type of programs they're trying to cut. So all that crap is bullshit either way. Tens of billions from reinstating work requirements in welfare. That should not be a thing, because there's a reason why they're on welfare, is because they can't get a job that pays them more and pays them enough to stay off of welfare. So how about this? We start cutting their payments in regards to Congress, the House. Anybody who wants to get into office needs to promise to be taking a massive pay cut, because that's especially if they're establishment candidates, because they're already getting paid on the side by their donors anyway. You know, campaign contributions go for campaigning, so you have to live and eat while you're on campaign. So there you go. So all of this stuff is BS. It's all spending. None of it's from taxes. None of it should be cut whatsoever, as far as I can see. And majority of the fraud that I've seen, I have looked this stuff up. It's usually people who are on the right hand side of the spectrum in regards to politics. So for them to want to be able to do this, it means they're going to be going after some of their own colleagues in regards to that, and their colleagues will obviously get a pass in regards to that. Same thing with a lot of Democrats too, if they got PPP loans and were required to pay them back, but wound up actually just writing them off as a was it business loss. But anyway, yeah, this is all BS, and I kind of wanted to get to this for a couple of days, but I've been I've been focusing more on reading the Making Money Work for Us, How MMT Can Save America by L. Randall Ray, which is still out there. You can still go to realprogressive.org and go on to the book club, or no, I'm sorry, bookstore, which should be in the media area down. In fact, you know what? I could just show you, I suppose. And if I just find that now, let's see. Is it? No. Let's see. Yes, in media, you go down to bookstore, and you go down here, and it's right here somewhere. But this is the book I've been studying. This is Warren Mosler. You can get this on his, in here, of course, but on his website. I think it's moslereconomics.com. It's free either way. But in any case, that's neither here nor there again. But whatever. Anyway, but that's what I want to say regards to that. The United States is a sovereign currency country, meaning we're not lacking funds. We're lacking capacity. We're lacking, maybe we're lacking raw material and some labor, but we're not lacking the funds for it. And if you spent money on college tuition to get more people educated, if you spent the amount of money for new housing, that could be considered low income, but not really. You have the same type of utilities or features as a luxury home, but at a low income housing price, then you would be almost at the same level of class wise. So there's that, those two things. Single payer healthcare system would actually save people money, because if you're a part of a union and you've been spending this whole time fighting for healthcare, this time you'll actually be fighting for wages and not healthcare, because healthcare would be taken care of, and not on a state by state level, but at the federal level. State by state usually have to raise local taxes for that, or be subject to Part D, I think Medicare Part D, which is still, which is I'm not quite sure if that's state funded or federally funded. Either way, what's the point of being a state by state Medicare for all if the organization that's doing it is acting like this insurance company anyway? You still have a middleman right there. That's just my point of view, but whatever. But yeah, either way, everything that MMT stands for or advocates for is deflationary, because you may have to spend more or replace at least one system, but it would be cost effective. It would create jobs in the long run. It would definitely bring up fucking wages. It would take the price gouging out of the game, and it would bring you more accountability. The only people who don't want those things are the politicians that get paid by those same industries that want to make sure it's deregulated so they can make as much money and charge the government overpriced for stuff that would be cheaper if the government was actually pricing it. Anyway, and that's neither here again. But yeah, don't believe anything the politicians tell you if they say we can't afford it. That's bullshit. That's BS. That's horse crap, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It's either way is not true. It's completely and utterly not true. Look up Canada, look up the UK, look up Japan, look up China. They are all sovereign currencies. As far as I know about, at least I know China is, Canada is, and the UK. They have no funding restraints, just like us. So look at, that's what MMT helps me with. It allows me to broaden that part of my brain. Go, oh, well, let me see. What is their exchange rate? What are they paid to something, like, paid to, say, US dollar? Because they're paid to another currency, they have to actually take their money and they have to buy that currency in order to be able to use that. I think I may be wrong with the last part, but whatever. In any case, yeah, that's all I want to say as far as that part goes. If you are still a subscriber to my YouTube channel, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. And I hope that other people do. I also hope that people go to my TikTok, Calvin Taylor 666 on TikTok, and follow me there, because I want people to know the truth about what a government, like a government that controls its own currency, that is embedded in its constitution, that says that only Congress can spend money into the economy in regards to direct payments and stuff of that nature. And the Fed and Treasury do it through loans. So there are two different ways of doing it. The more you know about modern monetary theory and stuff of that nature, the better educated you get. That's why right now I think Josh Howley, I think his name is, he's trying to limit the age on social media. He's trying to have it to 16 above. I think 16 above is not good. There should be no restrictions on age, just like there's like 16 above for voting. That's fine. That should be fine anyway, because that way the so-called democracy system can be taught in high school and all that other stuff. Anyway, yeah, that just tells me he wants to dumb people down. And same thing with Florida. Florida burning books, and like, it's like, what the fuck, man? People are trying to be themselves, not be told what to be. Like, excuse me? Like, we're supposed to be about freedom. That's not freedom. No part of that is freedom. That is one person dictating what you can and cannot be taught, or what you can and cannot do. That is a self-serving dictatorship. And that's everything the Republicans claim that the Democrats want to do. When in reality, both parties are trying to do the version of the same thing. But whatever. Follow me on TikTok, subscribe here. For more information about Real Progressives, go to realprogressives.org. Go to Warren Mosler, or I think it's Warren, just look at Warren Mosler. Mike Norman, Stephanie Kelton, Bill Mitchell, L. Randall Ray. Those are the actual economists that are right, that use their college education in the right way, and they don't spend time speculating and making up shit. They look at accurate crap as far as that part goes. That's why they've been right for the past freaking shit since the 90s. It was MMTers that predicted that we would have a great financial crisis because of the housing market, because of credit, because of the repeal of Glass-Steagall and laws like that, and allowing financial organizations or financial companies, corporations to get together and say, "Hi, how are you? Let's bet." Peace out for now. Coming up next, I will be reading the last portion of El Rando Ray's "Make Money Work for Us: How MMT Can Save America." Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back to WTF is MMT. I'm actually on the last chapter of this book right here, which again is called "Making Money Work for Us: How MMT Can Save America" by L. Randall Ray. And I'm actually going to be doing a second channel here pretty soon that will be strictly for story time. So I'm calling it story time, or Calvin Taylor's story time, or something to that effect. It's something. But I will be not this one. I will be doing readings of MMT related books, and the other one would be strictly just like randomish sort of books I have. So stay tuned for both. But today I'm finishing this off. But I'll be doing this without the camera on. So okay, so we're back. I'm on page 148, and I'm at the MMT's policy agenda. MMT is largely descriptive how a sovereign currency system works, but as many MMT proponents are progressive, the understanding that MMT brings to our discussion about sovereign currencies or sovereign currency can be used by centrists and conservatives. Progressive MMT proponents support policies such as the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare, millionaire and billionaires taxes to reduce inequality, antitrust actions to reduce price gouging, a variety of welfare programs to raise incomes at the bottom, policies to reduce racial and gender discrimination, and so on. However, this is a big however. These do not necessarily follow directly from MMT. What MMT says is that the finance of such programs is not a constraint. Resources are a constraint. Policy is a constraint, but lack of money is not. A conservative or libertarian might argue against all these programs, even if she understands that finance is not a constraint. She simply opposes them on the grounds that the free market solutions are better. Note that it is probable that most right-wing politicians already understand that finance is not really a constant. They raise the issue of finance only when it comes to progressive policy. Conservatives rarely demand pay-fors when they advocate a bigger military budget for a new war. They never demand pay-fors when they advocate more tax cuts for the rich. They don't demand pay-fors when they push for more subsidies of the biggest corporations. While they might invoke the ridiculous Laffer curve argument that tax cuts for the rich pay for themselves through references to trickle-down economics, they are well aware that this has never worked. Tax cuts for the rich always redistribute more income and wealth to the top, and they never generate enough revenue to offset the tax cuts, so the budget deficit gets bigger. Many Republicans really hope that more military spending for wars or tax cuts for the rich do increase the deficit. This then gives them the excuse to cut social spending or at least to oppose more. It is a simple starve the beast strategy, and everyone understands this. Unfortunately, it is mostly Democrats who played the pay for game, and it has been a policy disaster for the past half century. So we need to be clear that neither progressive nor conservative policies are necessarily supported by MMT. They are policy choices enabled by understanding that finance is not a constraint. There are, however, three policies that do follow direct from MMT. We could say that they are the core policies that all who understand the implications of MMT ought to support. MMT is best known for advocating for job guarantee, for the job guarantee, followed by its support for interest rate targeting by the central bank and floating exchange rate. Let's examine each and explain why each follows from the understanding that MMT developed. We'll take them in reverse order. And yeah, I just realized that was the last portion of yesterday's reading, but anyway, I figured the hell I was keep reading as far as that part goes. Anyway, so floating exchange rates. MMT lists the following 5 conditions as necessary for a currency sovereignty. Government chooses a money of account and issues a currency denominated in that money unit. Government imposes liabilities, taxes, fees, fines, and in the old days, tithes and tribute in the case of religious authority or conquerors, respectively. This is 1 and 2. Government accepts its own currency in payment of those liabilities. 3. This is number 4. If government issues other liabilities such as bills and bonds, those are payable in its own currency. 5. Government does not promise to redeem its own currency for precious metal or other currencies, that is, currencies issued by other authorities, usually foreign, at a fixed exchange rate. Now, think about that for a second. Every time you hear someone talk about Zimbabwe, Cuba, Venezuela, pretty much any other country that's not the US and the UK, and well, they say we borrow money from China, which is ridiculous because we can't borrow our own money from a different country. just think about the other countries that are either pegged to USD, pay or not pay, but have a fixed interest rate on either they charge more for importing than exporting and other things of that nature. Because if you think about these five rules of a sovereign currency, then you'll know the difference between those countries and what people say about those countries versus our country. So just think about that for a second. Pause this, think about that for a second, and just if you should probably take notes on that alone. Because if someone actually brings that up in conversation, you then have the answer to that question, or you have the answer to that bullet point. Because usually a bullet point of either party to bring down the, I guess you say, quote unquote, theory of monetary theory. Anyway, the final condition implies a floating currency. Note that by floating, we do not mean free float. That is a market-determined rate. Most governments intervene in some manner or other if they believe the exchange rate is moving too much. Whether appreciating or depreciating policies that are used include changes the internet interest rate target. See the next. Okay, so the next section. Yeah, the next section, by the way, section is interest rate targeting. See the exchange rate is moving too much, whether appreciating depreciation, trade policy to impact imports or exports, and capital controls restricting financial asset flows across borders. The critical difference between managing a currency using these tools and pegging is that in the first case, government's intervention is discretionary, but in the case of currency peg, government commits to maintaining the fixed exchange rate. If there is pressure on it to move in either direction, government must take action. If it cannot redeem its currency at the fixed price against the gold or foreign currency, it has defaulted on its promise. Even the doubt that a government can maintain the peg will lead to a run out of the currency. That is, an attempt to convert the currency to whatever it is pegged to. This generally leads to a currency or exchange rate crisis with results that are often devastating. The consequence is that the country with the pegged currency surrenders some of its domestic policy space. It needs to operate as the economy so that the gold or foreign currency flows into the country, usually through a positive trade balance. Although the flow could be due to factor payments, such as profit flows from abroad or on the capital account sales of finance assets. When flows turn against the country with a peg, the usual response is to adopt an austerity policy to make the population sufficiently poor that they stop buying imports and to make domestic wages sufficiently low that exports rise. This is what we mean by reduction of policy space. It may not be possible to pursue full employment and rising living standards at home. Pegging a currency can be somewhat less severe than actually adopting a foreign currency, often called dollarization, as a number of countries either formally adopted the US dollar as a currency or have rigidly pegged to the dollar and accept it as domestic payment, even of taxes. When Godley, the famous economist who developed the sectoral balance approach, discussed in Chapter 4 said that adopting a foreign currency is equivalent to voluntarily becoming a colony of the issuer of that foreign currency. He warned that European nations that adopted the euro had effectively become colonies. That's true, subjecting themselves to the whims of the European Central Bank, the issuer of the euro. We will not go into that in detail here, but history is littered with sad stories of countries that have either dollarized or adopted hard pegs to the US dollar. To be fair, there are a few success stories. Countries like a big exporter, Singapore, for example, have been able to adopt hard pegs but still thrive. But generally, adopting your own currency and letting the exchange rate float creates the most domestic policy space to pursue the public interest. While MMT doesn't insist that this is best for every country in the world, for those that can make use of policy space to raise living standards, floating the currency is best. Now, the interest rate targeting. MMT argues that central banks can and do target the overnight interest rates. In the US, this is called the Fed funds rate. Other than acting as the lender of last resort in financial crisis, acting as the Treasury's bank, operating the clearing system for checks and possibly regulating financial institutions, interest rates targeting is the most important policy of central banks. This is no longer controversial. 25 years ago, when MMT began, many thought central banks can control the money supply, and they did set money growth targets. Fortunately, none of the central banks of the major economies even pretend to do that now. It is widely accepted that central banks do not have the tools to target the money supply. They do, however, set and hit the overnight interest rates, and indeed can target any particular interest rate they choose. For example, they can set the interest rate on a 30-year Treasury bond simply by announcing the target rate and standing by ready to sell or buy a sufficient quantity of such bonds to hit their target. This is widely recognized today. There is, however, controversy about whether or where to set the overnight target, and perhaps some controversy about the utility of setting and hitting other interest rates. MMT has gained a reputation for advocating near zero overnight rates, what came to be called ZIRP, which stands for Zero Interest Rate Policy, after the GFC, when many central banks did indeed adopt such targets. While most economists saw this as temporary policies to deal with the crisis, MMT, following John Maynard Keynes, argued that this should be permanent policy. This helps to keep other rates low. The overnight rate target is the base rate off which other rates set, which reduces interest income. Keynes called that euthanasia of the rentier, advocating eliminating any interest reward to those who do not take risk. That generally flows to higher income people. At the same time, it lowers rates on borrowing, which tends to benefit low-income people who are net debtors. It also can promote both private and public investment by lowering the borrowing costs of finance long-term investment projects like infrastructure. Many MMT proponents advocate elimination of government bonds altogether. They see these as unnecessary, since all government spending is paid for through reserve credits to bank accounts held at the central bank. Bonds are then sold to drain reserves and to let banks and others earn interest on a risk-free asset, a claim on the sovereign government. This is unnecessary, and it simply provides income to the holders, mostly institutions and higher wealth individuals. Bonds also further the myth that the sovereign government needs to borrow from savers to finance its spending, which is false, as we've explained. Hence, many MMT proponents argue for dropping the bonds. If government wants to pay a small amount of interest on reserves, so be it. It will be seen for what it is, a part of monetary policy designed to keep overnight rates above zero. A counter argument is that there's a public purpose in paying interest to some select entities, such as pension funds, other retirement accounts, and maybe insurance companies. They can hold longer-term government bonds that make part of their portfolios risk-free, but still interest-earning. However, if this is seen to be in the public interest, bond ownership should be narrowly limited only to those kinds of institutions that serve a public interest. Again, retirement savings could be an example, or individual savings bonds, with purchases limited to lower income households to use for college savings. For example, this would be part of public policy to promote and reward saving by low-income households. Job guarantee. The final policy is by far the most important for MMT, a universal job guarantee that would provide jobs at decent pay with benefits for anyone who wants to work. Above, we have briefly discussed the MMT view that employment is a fundamental right, particularly in a society that believes that he who does not work neither shall he eat. I guess. Capitalism places a high value on income payments going to those who contribute to the production process. However, it has long entertained a false presumption that the market can provide jobs to all who want them. This is not and never has been true. Under capitalism, firms hire only the number of workers they think they need to produce the amount of output that can be sold for profit. In other words, capitalists hire workers only if they think that they can profit from the employment. This always leaves a substantial part of the potential labor force unemployed. If that were not bad enough, those left behind are those who face the most discrimination by gender, by race, by age, by ethnic origin, and by any other distinguishing characteristics that can be discriminated against. Discrimination is practiced and perpetuated because it is profitable. By discriminating against a group, employers can not only pay them less, but also can use them to keep the wages of others lower. Such discrimination is built into the nature of capitalism. It is a divide and rule strategy that pits workers against workers. The threat that the group facing discrimination because of their gender, race, etc., may take your job keeps you to subservience. This threat is as old as capitalism itself. Universal Job Guarantee, or JG, that offers equal access, equal pay, and equal treatment can counter such discrimination. The program's wage and its benefits and working conditions will set the standard that all other employers must meet. It levels up by hiring off the bottom. It takes workers as they are, provides them with the job and decent pay treatment. It forces other employers to compete. But also important from the MMT view, the JG anchors the currency. We know that taxes drive the currency, creating a demand for it to pay taxes to the currency issuer. But that does not determine the currency's value. On that margin, the currency's value is determined by what you must do to obtain it. If you need to work an hour to obtain $15, and establishing the value of 1 hour equals $15. My ministry used to ask students, what is the minimum wage in the U.S.? A student would raise her hand and say $3.35 an hour. The legal minimum wage is in the early 1980s. He'd respond, no, it isn't. If you cannot find a job, you get zero. Then he'd go on to say that if there was a JG, he called it employer of last resort, a term left over from the Roosevelt administration that would establish an effective minimum wage at whatever the program paid, and then he'd talk about the virtues of New Deal's job programs that provided jobs to millions of former unemployed workers. The point is that JG establishes the value of an hour of labor, and it helps to keep it stable through time. If wages start to rise outside the JG program, employers can always recruit out of the JG program at a wage slightly above the program wage. If it pays, for example, $15 per hour, then private employers can hire labor out of the program to say $15.25 an hour. This helps to dampen wage and price inflation as the economy grows. The JG anchors the currency by supplying labor when the private sector needs it and by absorbing labor when the private sector lays off workers. Then that ensures wages do not fall below $15 an hour. An example, no matter how bad a recession becomes, by hiring the unemployed, the program prevents a recession from going too deep by maintaining wages and incomes. Economists call that an automatic stabilizer, and the JG is the strong one. It maintains employment, wages, income, prices, and consumption. Government spending on the program is automatically countercyclical, rising in a slump. Workers flow into the program and falling in the boom. Workers are recruited by private employers. Exactly what we want automatic. It doesn't require discretionary action by politicians, which could take too long. And note, given our understanding of sovereign currency finances, there is no worry about how to pay for it. Uncle Sam can afford it. The MMT economists have worked for a quarter century, building on the idea of MMT to develop proposals to implement JG. They have worked out all the details, what kinds of projects, how much to pay workers, and what benefits to include, who will run the program, and how it will be administered, how big it is likely to be, and how effective it will be at maintaining the value of the currency and in fighting inflation. There is no need to recount all of this, as Pavlina Chunova, I think her name is, has nicely summarized most of the findings in her book. Like the rest of MMT, the JG has easily withstood all the critiques that have been raised. There are a number of proposals that have already been brought to Congress and a number of groups devoted to fighting for the JG, among which we highly recommend the National Jobs for All Network. People often ask, if we implement an MMT, can we be sure more government spending doesn't lead to inflation? Our answers are: one, MMT is not something you implement. It is a description of how some government really spends. It concludes that affordability is not a problem. Still, how much you spend and what you spend on do matter. We prefer targeting spending to achieve the public purpose. And one of the most important public purpose is to ensure that everyone who wants to work can get a job. Two, the main spending policy we recommend is the JG. It ensures full employment, providing a job to anyone who wants one. That is as targeted as you can get. Further, it is spending that cannot cause inflation. It sets a floor price to labor with the wage it pays after incurring wages. As per our example above, 1 hour equals 15. Once everyone gets a job, government spending stops growing. As the economy picks up, workers are pulled out of the program and government spending falls automatically. It is an automatic stabilizer and automatically inflation fighter. It is a fixed price floating quantity model. See chapter 3, and as such cannot cause inflation. To be sure, the JG is not the only government program. Liberals will want lots of others. Conservatives will want different ones and maybe less government. MMT will let them negotiate all of that with the democratic process, choosing the final mix. Whatever that mix is, the JG will ensure full employment and will exert a stabilizing force on prices and the economy as a whole. E, conclusion. The monetary system is a wonderful creation. It allows for individual choice while giving government access to resources needed to allow it to work for us to achieve a just society. The monetary system spurs entrepreneurial initiative. It finances, organizes, and distributes much of the nation's output. It is one of the primary mechanisms used by government to accomplish the public purpose. There could be a better way to organize production and distribution. There could be a better way to allocate resources between public and private. There could be a better way to reduce the private sector to serve not only its own interest, but also the public interest. But if so, we have not seen it. Until that better system comes along, we need a progressive meme for the monetary system we've got. Progressives have been in retreat for the past half century. Yes, they've won some battles, mostly in the social sphere. They've lost almost all economic battles. However, at least some of those losses are due to adoption of the wrong framing of money. We need to recognize that monetary system is important It is not merely or even mainly used to lubricate exchange of goods and services from its origins, and the monetary system has played an important role in pursuit of the public interest. It also is used in pursuit of the private interest, and is, especially in recent years, used by any elite of Wall Street insider in their own selfish interest. To be sure, the monetary system cannot and should not do anything. Or I'm sorry, should not do everything. While capitalism tends to extend the monetary sphere into an even larger proportion of our social provisional process, the economy, that can be carried much too far, there are areas that need to be kept off limits, including many functions within the purview of government. We pay our judges and lawyers, but we do not want them to sell judgments to the highest bidder. We let our candidates for higher office accept campaign funds, but we do not want candidates to sell themselves to contributors. As we push progressive memes, we acknowledge that we deserve a better government than we got, and better than we've had even at its best. Many of those in government serve private interests and not the public interest. They've been bought and paid for. The monetary system provides the power to do good, and the power to do bad is the other side of the coin. Still, even a largely bought and incompetent government, remember, heck of a job, Brownie, aka Michael Brown, in charge of President Bush's rescue of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, is better than no government. Even the highly suspect bailout of Wall Street in the aftermath of the GFC was better than no policy response at all. A better government can serve us better. Compare the Obama administration's handling of Hurricane Sandy to Bush's handling of Katrina. Perfection is hard to achieve, but not necessarily to attain some success. Good is not the enemy of perfection. As we discuss, modern cognitive science teaches that we think through the use of stories that integrate words and audio, visual, sensory memories. Stories engage the reader and trigger emotional responses. Coherent narratives are easier to remember. While we might think of stories as a little more than entertainment, in fact, stories help us to process, organize, and better understanding the information flowing from our five senses. Brian Boyd goes further, focusing on the evolutionary advantages that storytelling has had, arguing that we cannot, in fact, live without stories because they are an adaptation that has enabled our success as a species. We enjoy them, they bring us together and foster cooperation and sharing of values. They encourage attention and empathy. We're told a different money story in this book to reinforce the main idea. After all, the way that we will convince others is through storytelling. While lots of economists like to parade around with their complex math, their models simply add a patina of sophistication to the simple stories they tell. Stories win the debates, not math. And we've got the better stories. Keynes once said he hoped for the day when economists might be thought as useful as dentists. That's a two-edged sword. It requires first that economists actually become as Keynes said, as humble and as competent as their craft as dentists are at theirs. Unfortunately, that day still resides beyond reach. Economists are rarely humble and often precisely wrong. Their errors do not build the confidence of Keynes' hope. Further, economists are masters at putting simple ideas into mathematically complex models that no one can understand. This intentionally obfuscation. We hope that this book can make a positive contribution towards Keynes' goal of raising the reputation of the economics profession, perhaps at least part way to the esteem in which dentistry is held. And that would be it as far as this book goes. So I'd like to thank you for staying with me for the duration of this book. But the next book I will be reading, it will be The Depths of Myth by Stephanie Kelton. I did read it once before, but I have never actually read it. Well, no, I've read it on Anchor and other platforms, but not in a somewhat video sense. And I have not understood it as well as I should now. So anyway, so that'll be next week. And I will be starting also next week the other YouTube channel. I'll share that when the time comes up. Otherwise, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for reading with me. If you already have the book, and you have done it. Thank you for being a part of the Real Progressives book club. If you were, it was a very great experience for me anyway. I don't know about you, I can't speak for you obviously, but for me it was a great experience and help to continue doing it and help to continue promoting it and stuff of that nature. Anyway, so yeah, thanks for listening. Please reach out if you like to my Green Autistic Progressive at yahoo.com for any questions you may have or put in the comment section. And also visit realprogressives.org to learn more about MMT and Real Progressives. We are, if you look around, the real, actual, only real progressive organizations out there that is actually trying to get, or at least trying to get people to understand that taxes don't fund anything. Taxes are a provision for the currency for the government to take out once it's circulated in the economy. Anyway, so peace out for now.